Hey, good afternoon or good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's quick live session where I'm going to be joined by one of my relatively new colleagues. So let's say hi to Maria straight away. Hey, Maria.
Hi, everyone.
How's it going?
It's going great, thanks.
Good.
It's good to be here today.
Yeah, it's good to finally have you. We've scheduled this for what seems like ages and never actually managed to get round to doing it. So it's good that we've actually finally can do it now. So just for the benefit of people watching who maybe have not seen you pop up on various YouTube channels and things, who are you and what do you do?
So I'm the channel account manager at Capture One, one of them, and I like helping out some of our partners to pop up some cool and useful resources of Capture One, hopefully in their YouTube channels or Facebook accounts. So whatever helps spread the word in Capture One to different countries. So I'm doing these sessions sometimes in Spanish, sometimes in French, sometimes in English, and just hoping for everyone to understand what Capture One is about.
Great, fantastic. So a lot more linguistically educated than I am, so so we might see you popping up Spain, France, South America, I guess, all over.
Yes, that's the
Excellent.
idea.
Cool. So the purpose of today was to introduce you, of course, so people can put a face to the name, and also we're just going to run through a couple of edits of our favorite things in Capture One, or at least an image that we found interesting to edit as well. Now, just in case that I speak for too long, we're going to let you go first as well, Maria. So I'm going to bring up your screen, which we should be able to see now, and you can tell us what you're going to edit today as well.
Well, I hope I won't speak for too long either, because I do tend to speak a lot and I do tend to speak really fast. So if that's too fast, just pop it out in the comments, and I'll be taking a look at it from time to time.
Cool.
So yeah, when you told me let's do a session together, I thought, it made me think about the things that I like the most at Capture One, and there's plenty of them. So it was kind of hard to choose, but then I thought, okay, one of my favorite new features is the style brushes.
Great.
And then some of the color tools, which are just amazing. And if I had to pick one of them, I would pick probably the color balance tool, which is so helpful and so intuitive to help me get my own mood into the images. So I thought I would use just this photo as an example to show how to edit with these tools that I like. This is a portrait taken by my friend Abel Castro, so thanks Abel for joining us indirectly into this session. And I'm just going to hide my browser here so you can better see the photo. And this is my proposed edit. You can see I'm going to show you the before and after. So this should be the before, and this is the after. I hope that you like it, and I'm going to show you around this process. So just letter Y to go back to the after. You can see up here on my layer panel, there is quite a lot of stuff going on. I'm just going to, if you want, just start by toggling off all the layers and, just so you can see how this is built. The layer workflow into Capture One, it's something that I really need to use. I don't think I know how to edit a photo without using layers anymore.
No, that's pretty difficult not to use layers now these days.
Yes, exactly. Not only because you can address different problems in different parts of the image, but also because I find myself that many times it's much more useful and intuitive to just use the simplest tools, but built and stacked into some layers. So you have some control over what's going on in each of these layers, and you're going to be able to be much more on top of your edit. So for example, this is a workflow that I tend to always follow, and if you have seen me editing in the other sessions before, you probably know this. So I just start with a basic adjustments tool, and probably I would just be using here some curves or white balance. Then I add some color, and then I would move on to my style brushes. So iris enhance, heal, some dodge and burning, and some add detail. So that's what we're going to be seeing today. Actually, to not lose track of this, I'm just going to clone the variant. And with my variant number 2, I'm going to just reset this photo, and let's just start from the beginning. So as you have seen on my layers, I don't even do anything on the background. And the reason behind this is because the background doesn't have an opacity control. And I think it's really positive to always be able to use this opacity control, because sometimes you go too far, and as you start to stack layers, you realize that, okay, I maybe have gone too far with this adjustment, and then you would have to go back into the certain tools and tweak them around, and that's not super helpful. So I just like to start with a new fill adjustment layer, and I would basically use this as a background. I trying to name my layers, at least when I'm live, so you can all follow what's happening here. And with this fill layer, I always like to make sure that it's filled, because if there is no mask, nothing will have an effect. But like this, it will have an effect overall the image, and that's exactly what I want. So the first thing I want to do here is to add some contrast, and I do tend to use a lot of curves. Sometimes when you're new to Capture One, or you're new to raw editing at all, you might be a bit intimidated by curves, but don't worry, because there is always something that works, which is just this little S-shaped curve that's going to be great for 99% probably of images. There is another choice that I make here, which is whether to use the RGB curve or the Luma curve. So probably David showed this like a million times, but this is what would happen.
100 million times, yeah.
Yes, but I think it's always nice to show, because this
Definitely.
is actually one of the coolest features in Capture One, especially for those of you who are shooting portraits. So if you're adding contrast with the RGB curve, you're going to be affecting not only contrast and light, but also colors. And you're going to be unwillingly saturating some of the colors which lie around the reds and yellows probably. And that, as you can imagine, like you can see here, is not self-flattering for portraits. And if you go and exaggerate that a bit more, you're going to see how the skin is turning into some kind of a natural tone. That's probably not so flattering. So let's just reset this curve, and let's work with the Luma curve instead. So by doing this kind of curve from the Luma part of things, you can see that light is affected, contrast is affected, but the saturation is not affected. That can give us a kind of unsaturated or moody image, but it's always easier to correct this when you have a desaturated origin, and then you can just go ahead and saturate things a bit from the saturation slider. That's going to be saturating all the colors equally and in a flattering way, and not kind of losing control of what channels are being saturated and what not. So that's probably a good place to start. This is probably a bit too much of contrast, so let's just tweak it around. And let's have a nice starting point, probably around there. And you can see we have nice contrast, we have nice colors, and we have a nice skin tone. So I think that this would be a very good place to start for editing a portrait, or that is something that I tend to do a lot. The other thing that I would do in the basic adjustments layer, that would be the white balance. The white balance is actually the base of color that we're going to use for the whole edit. So it depends on the image, and it depends on the mood, and it always also depends like according to the seasons or how I feel like in each given day. But I do tend to work with cooler colors that that changes according to my mood, so that's not always so, and this is very subjective, so feel free to use the colors that you like. Some people think that white balance should always be like neutral white thing, and I don't think it should be like that, because it can also give us a very good starting point to work with color and to build on from there, and it can be used in a creative way. That's what I think. I don't know if you agree, David.
Yeah, absolutely. There's the technically correct white balance, and there's the one that looks the best, and the two aren't necessarily the same either.
Exactly. So that's what I like to do for my white balance. In here, I'm going to keep it kind of yellowish because I think it fits the mood, and I want to give this image, this portrait, kind of a more classical look. So I think that yellow is going to do just fine, but I don't really like the magentas on the skin, and I don't really like the magentas on the background. We also have a red background, so if we put in a lot of magentas, and it's going to look, I don't really like the looks of it. So I think that we're going to be fine around here in the matter of basic adjustments. And if I toggle on and off this layer, you can see that we did quite a lot here. And it's not finished, but it gave us a nice idea of where to start with. So that would be my basic adjustments. And then from here, I would take like 20 seconds to look at the image and think, okay, how else it can be improved? What else I can do here? Because even if it can seem kind of obvious, I think it's important to just stop and think and say, okay, how can I actually improve this image? Because the final look should be better than the starting point. And, sometimes we get caught up in the process and we forget about this tiny little detail. So yeah, I would take a moment to look at here and to say, okay, how can I work creatively in this image? In this case, I can see that we have a red background and we have kind of reddish hair, and we have green eyes. And I think that this contrast between the green eyes and the red background is going to work just great. So my edit will try to enhance exactly this kind of mood between the red and the green, because we not only create contrast with light, but also with color. So the next thing I would do here is just to create another fill layer. And this would be for color adjustments. And there is two basic tools that I use to edit color besides the white balance that is on the background. But in here, also making sure that it's a fill layer, I would move ahead to this color tool tab, and I would work with two different tools here. So in this case, I would use the color editor and the color balance. The color editor I tend to work with first. In this case, I like the redness of the background, but I think it's kind of too overwhelming, so it's kind of taking some attention from the model, from the subject. So I would like to desaturate and darken a bit this red background. But if we want to do this with the basic editor, which is useful many times, but it's not good for everything, we would have a problem here, because if we try to desaturate, we also have red on the skin tone, so that's not going to roll this time. So what I'm going to do instead is just take the advanced color editor, and I'm going to pick a color sample from my background, and I'm going to really refine this color selection to make it just affect the background. So I'm just going to click this option to see what I'm actually selecting, and I'm trying to get rid of the more desaturated colors, which are going to be the ones on the skin and the hair. And that's probably good. Just going to make sure that I have a very smooth selection to not create any sharp edges. So something like that. And now I am able to work with the saturation and the brightness just on the background, and just in a very subtle way. I'm going to tweak it a bit more towards the orangish. And I think that's going to be better. Probably I'm just going to desaturate a bit more. Yeah, just making sure that I'm not affecting the skin here. I think that's quite clean.
Yeah, it's a great selection actually, and highlighted a really important point between basic and advanced. That basic, well, as you said, works great in this situation. It wouldn't, because you don't have that saturation range control. So that's a great example.
Exactly, and I used to go crazy before I started working with Capture One, because I was like, it's not okay that I can't do this from my raw editor. I can't do this in all images in the same time. So I kind of went crazy until I found out that this tool existed in Capture One, and that made me so happy.
Good.
So that would be a part of the edit. We can also probably work a bit with the skin tone. We have a skin tone mode into the color editor that you already know probably if you have been seeing David's amazing tutorials and sessions. So I would just try to click on a neutral area, more or less around here. And as we also have red in the background, I would have to do the opposite kind of selection. So sometimes around there, as we have a lot of freckles, which I think look gorgeous, it's going to be kind of tricky. So I'm not going to apply a very aggressive uniform slider thing. But I think that just a little bit, that's going to make it look good. And as I don't really like the magentas on my skins, sometimes people tell me like, but magenta on the skin is good because it makes it look healthy. And I'm like, when it tweaks a bit more toward green, it kind of has a more like a painterly feel to me. So I do tend to tweak them towards the green. Maybe you're thinking that this is crazy or something, but I like it like this. And in the end of the day, it's a creative process, and we say what is good and what is not.
Yeah, it's what you like is important 99% of it.
I'm glad you say the same way, and this is why we edit good together.
Absolutely.
So as I have my color editor thing going on, I am also going to add a bit of color balance. And the color balance, I would say, it's my top one favorite tool in Capture One, because it lets you do so much in such an intuitive way, and you don't need to be the master of colors or the master of selections, and you can just add a nice tint and a nice feel to the images, and add this kind of personal mood. So something that I really like to do is to add a cooler dominance into the shadows and a warmer dominance into the highlights, because that is kind of how our brain perceives reality, and whatever we do in post-production that is going to help us achieve that kind of realistic look that doesn't always match reality, funnily enough, that's going to always help us to transmit some kind of feel to the images. So in this time I'm going to choose probably more like a cyan-ish color balance for the shadows. We could, many things work here, and as it's so intuitive, the best thing is just to move around the color wheel and see what works. I think in this case, I'm going to stay a bit more toward the green area of things for the backgrounds, and I'm going to warm up the highlights a bit to compensate for the coolness. So I think that's going to look quite nice. And if I show you the before and after of this color balance tool, I think that you kind of see what I mean. Maybe I went a bit too far here, but yeah, I think that you kind of see what I mean when I say kind of it helps you to add mood into the images, because otherwise it could be kind of flat, or it could be like the colors are coming too much like straight from camera, which is something I like to avoid as much as possible. So yeah, I really like this tool, and I hope that you like it as well. It made you kind of want to try it out for yourselves and experiment a bit more creatively. So that would be probably my main basic adjustments for color and for basic light and contrasting. And now I would start to work more towards the local part of things. So I can see here that I have super nice iris with a really nice color. I'd like to enhance it a bit. So luckily enough, we have a new tool that is called Style Brushes, and there is a brush that is literally called Enhance Iris. So that's going to be really useful in this case. And the good thing to work with style brushes is that it lets you play around with layers in a very intuitive way. So if I just want to enhance the iris, I can just pick this brush, which is called exactly like that, and just click on here. And you see that Capture One did everything by itself. It created a new layer. It called it Iris Enhance according to how the brush is called. And then I can just use it a bit. And let's zoom in to see what's actually happening. So I'm going to toggle this layer off. So you see that it's kind of giving it saturation and some contrast and some clarity, and that's going to look really great. If I go ahead and select my brush again, that's going to do it automatically. Something that I really, really like from this brush. And the fact that they all come with a low flow by default, it allows you to kind of paint the adjustments in gradually and to really have a lot of control of what you're doing. So you have things in a very natural way, and you don't need to be paying attention like, am I doing too much? Should I erase some of it? And if I show you the mask, it's a really bad mask. It really is. So it's just a bad mask, and it's kind of random, but it does work with the image, and that's what matters in the end of the day. So the other good thing of using style brushes is that you can use them just as they come, or you can add some adjustments on top of them. So in this case, as I'm wanting to play around with the warmness of the background and the green of the eyes, I can just go ahead again to my color balance tool, which has a lot of uses, and just on the master, I'm just going to add a little bit, just a really subtle green tint, so something around there. That's going to help me probably a bit more towards the yellow, yeah, something around that. That's going to help me really enhance this green tone of the eyes that otherwise would be kind of lost in the shadows. So I think that's another great use of the color balance tool. When you kind of just want to color a part of the image separately, you can use always the master or the shadows or whatever that part of the image is lying in.
That's also a really good, I guess, thing to realize with style brushes, that just because you've used the style brush that did iris enhance doesn't mean you then can't add to it. And I think I certainly forget that, and I know the customers do as well. So nothing's set in stone with those style brushes. It's just a shortcut.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that it's so flexible, because then if you wanted to apply this style brush into another image, it's not going to add the green. It's going to be as it comes, and maybe in another part of the image you want to add, I don't know, like red or yellow or whatever other color. You can just do it independently, and I think that works really great.
It does indeed.
Yeah, and we would have some other adjustments left to do. Probably I would add some using the same style brushes over here. There is another one I really like to use, which is the Add Detail, which is a really good combination of clarity and structure, and it's going to really help us make some of the parts of the subject pop up. So it's not usually so flattering to add a lot of clarity and structure into the skin tone, even if we have a great skin like it's the case here. But it's always good to add a bit of clarity and structure to make things really pop up, because it gives a nice tri-dimensional feel, but we don't want to apply it normally to the whole subject. So in this case, I'm just going to use this brush to apply this extra clarity and structure to some key parts like the eyes. Maybe not so much this one, because this one is a bit out of focus. So if we add a lot of clarity into an out of focus area, we can start creating some noise and stuff like that. So that's probably something we don't want to do. But we can probably also use it a bit on the lips, maybe a little bit on the nose to enhance some of these really cute freckles, and some other parts of the image that are filled with detail, like for example eyebrows, and we can kind of highlight a bit these little parts of the hair that are on focus and leaving the out of focus parts outside of this mask. You can see it's really, really bad masks. And this is why I like the style brushes, because they just let you work in this way that you don't need to really mask things out. You can just work as if it was, as if you were actually a painter, and when you're using the kind of Wacom tablet like I'm using, and I know David is too, it just makes things so much more intuitive and even more fun to work with.
Definitely. And again, with layers, you can tend to fall in the trap of trying to be super accurate, but most of the time that's not really necessary, and that actually looks worse if you try and be super accurate as opposed to being nice and fluid like you are.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes we are just obsessed with making the perfect mask, and then you realize that this mask made things look weird because there is like sharp edges and you can't always avoid. So yeah, this kind, for example, is always very flexible because I think I went too far probably on the eye, so I can just grab my eraser and make like 2 touches like that, and then that's going to be just fine. So just to not steal a lot more time from David, because he also has nice things to show you, I'm just going to...
That's why I said you go first. Yeah.
But I do talk a lot as well. So yeah, just to wrap things up, I'm just going to use a bit of a dodge and burn, also thanks to the style brushes. And I tend to really respect what is dark and what is bright into the real image. So I'm not really trying to invent anything here. So I'm just brushing down a bit on the areas of the image that are already in shadows, and just to kind of enhance those shadows that are already existing, but not create any different shadows. And by this, we can just have like a more volumetric feel on the whole image. I also like to darken my eyebrows a bit, so something around there. And, you know, kind of, as I said, enhance the already existing shadows within an image, because that's going to give it more volume. And you can see how cool it is to work with these brushes, because it feels like you're doing things naturally, but then, you know, it really does have an effect. And then when you are doing some burning, then you, of course, have to do some dodging. So in this case, I like to apply this dodging following the same rules with some little exceptions. So here on the bright parts of the image, probably a little bit on the eyes, maybe the teeth or something like that. And, you know, anything that you think that it's worth highlighting a bit, because naturally our eye is going to tend to look into the parts of the image that are brighter. And then there is a little trick also to do with the dodging style brush, which is, you know, right under the eyes we have these areas that are kind of darker under the eyes, and that's completely normal, and we are human beings and we have this kind of thing. And I don't really like to clone this out and remove it entirely, because it can really change the feel and look of a face. So what I do instead is just with a dodging brush, I'm just trying to illuminate this a bit, trying to brighten it up just a little bit. So it's still going to be there, it's just going to be a little bit more subtle. So let's see. Yeah, if I show you the before and after, it really makes the face look fresher, like, you know, like the model had a really good night's sleep, without completely changing her face. So I think that's a really good use of the dodging brush. And then we would have to remove some blemishes and stuff like that, and, you know, that you already seen from David 100 of times probably. So I'm not going to lose a lot of time in that. So just some of the basic stuff. I'm not even choosing the origin part. I'm just going to use Capture One and let Capture One choose by itself, and let's see how it works out. Okay, this one could be better because that was a big one, but I think that we are kind of there. I think, you know, if we wanted to really work on with this, we could make it a bit more accurate, but I think it did a nice job.
Yeah,
overall.
Looks fantastic. Can we see the before and after of everything?
Yes, so this is the global before.
Mm-hmm.
This is the this is the global after, and if you prefer to see it on split view, we were coming from here, and in just 20 minutes and me talking a lot, we came to this point.
Super nice. Actually, Abel is here, actually. I'm trying to find him. He says, Buenas tardes. So, hi, Abel. Thanks
nice.
for watching. Good question from, where is it? More existential question, La Caraja. What is the difference in working on the mood on the picture color editor versus color balance? Oh, that's the wrong one. Sorry, hang on.
Yeah.
Let's try this one. There we go. What is the difference in working on the mood on the picture color editor versus color balance?
So basically the difference is that the color editor lets you target a really concrete area of the image. When you're working in the advanced one, as I did, sometimes you can also use a basic color editor to make global tweaks in the look of the whole image. But I think that's, because when you're working with color ranges, that might create some conflicts wherever, like sometimes there are colors that are not completely red or completely orange, and they're going to kind of fall in between. And if you don't balance your adjustments very well, you can have like rough edges and artifacts and stuff like that. So I do use the color editor for more concrete local adjustments, and then I tend to work more with the color balance for a global look of the image.
Cool, nice. Michael says, Maria's editing is at least as great as she speaks fast.
Okay, then that must be awesome. Thank you.
Marcus says in Spanish she speaks so fast too. She could do 5 edits in 30 minutes. Yep. Speed edit the other way around. Exactly. So awesome. All right. Well, I've got a few minutes left, so I'll have to flex the Maria muscles and go fast as well. So this is a shot I was going to edit. Which is not like the best picture in the world. It was actually one of the last pictures I took with a bigger camera. The reason why I wanted to edit it was because it didn't turn out how I thought it would look like. Like when I actually took the shot, it was a big dramatic sky, the foreground was kind of more interesting and so on. So what I ended up with, just hiding behind Maria, was an edit that was closer to that. So we will go super speedy on this one. So first of all, again, I had to edit differently how I normally would. So quite often I'm adding contrast to a picture and clarity, but this is already kind of contrasty down here already. So this one actually looks better by taking contrast out, which is quite rare. I don't know about you, Maria, but it's very rare I'm going in the other direction on the contrast slider.
It's really surprising to me that you take this approach, but
yeah.
I saw the final edits and I think it looks awesome, so I'm just going to trust your criteria as always.
Cool. So, but it's, as I said, really unusual for me to go in this direction, and also unusual in the base characteristics. I'm actually going to put in a bit of extra shadow as well. So just to open up those trees a little bit. So maybe not that much, but something like that. The next thing was to fix, if you like, the basics like Maria, and I really like the idea of doing a basics layer, so I should probably do that more often. But it does need some clarity because it's a bit on the flat side, but if we go too much, then I don't want to lose the definition in the trees. So the sky could take a bit more, but really looking at the foreground, that's probably about as much as it would take. And again, unusual for me, I'm going to take the saturation out a bit because as it had this dramatic sky and we got soaked a few minutes after taking this, kind of didn't want big bright colors, wanted it to be more, muted and a bit more subtle. With the levels, what happens if we auto that? I don't want it to be too contrasty, so I'm going to pull those out a bit as well. So that's my Maria basic settings, I guess, just those kinds of things, which is trying to normalize out the whole picture as a good basis before we start doing layer stuff. So for the sky, a quick gradient mask. So that's this one over here. And I'm going to start drawing from the top where we finish. The mask will be at its weakest. If you didn't know, which is often a little known fact, if I press M now, obviously you can see what the gradient mask looks like, but that fall off is kind of linear from top to bottom. To make it non-linear, then you need to hold down your option key and then you can drag up the bottom slider so it's like a stronger fall off, like so. So now the mask will creep down a little bit, and really in this one we can go kind of stronger, so I'll probably add a bit of contrast, bit more clarity, pull the brightness down because that's going to affect the midtones. The reason why I'm using the brightness is if we did exposure, it's going to make this part of the sky very dark and look not especially natural. So brightness will pull the midtones down. If we did want to make this cloud look a bit moodier, then we could pull the shadows down a little bit as well. And really to finish that, it was again like with Maria, a few style brushes and a bit of healing and cloning. So for style brush wise, if I'm going to grab a burn brush, And let's just make this a little bit smaller. Or let's go for, let's burn first of all. So I'm just going to make a couple of little tiny changes just to darken a few areas, and then do the opposite with the dodge brush, and then just open up some of those areas so that we're kind of almost making like some local contrast in there. Because I didn't like the fact that these trees got a bit too dark, but it's nice to try and build in a bit of light going on in there. The last thing, which was this annoying swan, although you criticised me for that because you said swans were nice, but I
love swans. I would leave it completely.
But I felt it's just a bit bright, kind of, it's the only white thing in the centre of that shot. So if we grab our healing brush and take this out, whoops, wrong area, my mistake. Let's just make this a bit on the smaller side, probably not that small, something like that, and just take that out and see what Capture One does. That's not super convincing. Now this is kind of a hard area to fully heal out, so we're going to try and make a bit of an extra tree going on, which if we stared at this like, you know, really close up with our face, we might see it looks a bit suspicious, but from the distance like so, it just takes out that bright bit. And there's a few other things, like if I was going to print this, I'd go over this with a bit more of a fine tooth comb and then take out, you know, some of these lumps and bumps down here which are a bit distracting. There's a little tiny white one there, there's another one there, and just go over that a bit closer. And maybe, do we like that bird or do we not like that bird?
I don't like that bird.
Okay, let's get rid of that bird. Swans are okay, but not that one. It's kind of messing up the clouds. And then I think on actually this edit, I can never make two edits look the same. That's probably a bit more contrasty and a bit more brighter at the back. So I think on the other shot made another layer, and this is what happens when you don't name your layers because you can't see what's going on, and just made it ever such a little bit kind of brighter in the foreground like so, and let's not desaturate it so much, but there we go. So if I stick on the old before and after, that's how it came out of camera. And as I said, I was just unhappy with it being that dingy, that saturated, you know, no depth in the shadows really, so it was kind of an opposite edit to what I normally do, but I was quite pleased with it at the end of it. So there we go. Did I squeeze that in? I had to.
Yeah, right on time.
I had to speak.
Sorry, I took so long.
No, it's all right. The whole point of this live was to introduce you and see your editing, not mine. Everyone's had enough of me for sure.
Everyone loves your editings.
Jim says deep sky it. Okay, Jim, let's deep sky it. I think I did maybe on the other edit. So let's find deep sky.
That's also a very cool one.
Yeah, let's make it nice and big. If you don't know deep sky, it does exactly that. It kind of enhances the blue and the details and the clarity. This one doesn't have a low flow because otherwise you get kind of where your brush is crossing over, then because the flow would be additive where it crosses over, then it doesn't look very smooth. So that's actually not bad, but I would probably do that. Just take it down a little bit so it's nice and subtle. But yeah, I agree, Jim, and I'll probably spend a bit more time being a bit more careful around the trees. But even with this slightly crappy mask, it actually does all right, to be honest. We've just got to fill that bit in there. Cool. I'm just checking the questions. Let's see. Jose was asking about your shot. Let's just I lost the question, sorry. Where's Jose's question gone? Can we change the orange background with the skin tone tool? I guess you could.
Yes, I guess you can. And this is something that I use sometimes I just make another layer to make sure I don't ruin the rest of the edit. This is something I use sometimes, but it's like when I have a background with different kind of tones in the same colors, and I don't like it and I want to uniform it. But the thing with the skin tone editor is that it works in a very subtle way with color. So even if we try to go crazy and completely change the color, that's not going to roll.
No.
Because it's a much subtle thing to do when you're working with skin tones. You don't normally want it to go all the way to the oranges, or you don't want it to go all the way to green. So it works in a subtle way. You could still use the advanced and, have a color selection after color selection, and, stack different color selections that would help you to completely change the mood of the image. But I kind of like it and the way it is here. But yeah, you can technically do it.
Yep. Yeah, I think there was an edit probably a couple of months back on our green challenge. You can look back through the live playlist, but there was a picture of a guy on a moped with a green background, and then I used the skin tone tool to even out the green tones so they were all a lot more similar. So I guess the skin tone tool, you could change the background to another color, but I think in this case it made more sense to use the advanced color editor for sure.
This one thing goes very well normally for the sea tone. So if someone likes to go out to the sea, and the sea has a crazy amount of different tones, this one would work usually very well for that.
Yeah, perfect. If you want it all turquoise or greener or blue or whatever, it's great for that. So awesome. So where can we next see you again? Because you're doing something in French soon, I believe, or was it in Spanish? I can't remember.
It's in Spanish.
Spanish.
Actually,
there we go.
Next Monday, I'll have a webinar with one of our partners in Spain, Kinaphoto, here on YouTube. And next Tuesday, that's going to be almost on a roll, we're going to be live with Canon Spain with Pablo Laguia, who is a Canon ambassador, and we'll be doing a live shot from Valencia.
Nice, perfect. So next Tuesday, yeah. So that
next Tuesday.
Well, great.
Save the date.
Set the date. That did come up quickly. Fantastic. All right, Maria, thanks for joining us today. Oh, if people want to follow you, they can do so on, you've stolen the best Instagram handle, Capture One Trainer. So if they want to follow you, head to Instagram and they can find you there. So thanks for joining us again today, Maria, and I'm sure we'll have you back soon as well.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. See you soon. Take care, everyone. Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.